live time. It's DHTV. We're back. We had a little hiatus before Christmas because, well, let's face it, we all fell apart together. Luckily, we've all been sort of sellotape back together, and we're back in 2022. I hope that you all had a wonderful Christmas. I hope you all had a super duper New Year. Well, as New Year, good at Christmas and New Year as you can be in the current circumstances. I'm back. I'm Mick Scarlett, for those of you who don't know. I don't know if there are any. And of course, we're joined by our superhero, Zec the Tech Richardson. Say hello, Zec.
Hello, Zec. Sorry, I just had to also slide myself across there. It's good to be back. We did have a long time away because we all just literally fell apart at the same time, which is the risk, isn't it?
It is. And that, dear viewer, is why we are going out to you to say, hello, please join our presenting team. We're looking for new presenters. So we've got a few feelers out, people that might be interested. But if you're watching and you think, oh, that sounds like something I fancy, then get in touch and we're going to build a kind of group of presenters who can all take turns. So we're not doing it all the while. And also we're going to be looking for people who aren't white, middle-aged men in wheelchairs. So, if that's you, join the gang. We'll train you up, and then you can have that. Also, we're also looking for people to take all the other slots. We only do one every 2 weeks. There's a hell of a lot of bandwidth there that you could join DHTV, Disability Horizons TV, with your own show. I'm talking to someone about doing a cookery show. There's lots of ideas. If you've got them, tell us and join the gang. And we can make it grow this year and turning it into a channel and then get loads of money from someone and go live on real telly and make a fortune. And I'm sure that Martin Sibley will be okay with that. Now, before I waffle on for any much longer, I've got to introduce our wonderful super duper guest. Yes, I'm afraid he is a white male aging wheelchair user, but that's okay because he is the one and only, the one and super duper Andrew Miller. Hello, Andrew. Woo!
Hello, Mick. Hello, Zec the Tech. Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be with you.
Yeah, now, Andrew, you, of course, started your career very much like mine by falling into the media as a disabled TV presenter and media type way back in the 80s. We did say that we'd be talking about the 80s quite a lot. And of course, the 90s, also a good era. Watching 90s Top of the Pops too. It was great. The music was brilliant. Every track. It's not like the 80s where you got things like Shut Up Your Face. But anyway, so you started, and I know we were kind of on the telly at the same time because you were doing a kids' TV show called Boom when I was doing Beat That. And we kind of swapped slots, didn't we? So you'd do it for a bit and I'd do it for a bit. And we basically were always opposite Pob. So how the hell did you get into television?
Well, we shared a slot. We shared a slot on Sunday morning for 2 or 3 years, Mick. And how successful that was.
Yes.
But yeah, how did I get into it? Well, I'd kind of realized as a child that if you work in television, you kind of have a pretty good view of everything. You get to see everything. I remember being taken to the open golf by my dad when I was a kid, and it came to near where we lived, and going tramping around this golf course. I hated golf. I had no interest in golf, but I couldn't see any of it because, of course, being in a wheelchair, you're below everybody. You couldn't see through all the spectators who surrounded the greens, and I spied the TV towers with the cameras and the cranes. I thought, that's where you get the good view. And so that kind of had an impression on me. And then I was lucky enough in the mid 1980s to get a gig with the BBC to make a documentary about the monarchy. And so I made that in about 1986, about 35 years ago. And in the middle of my university degree, that became my kind of calling card. And so, when I graduated from uni and looked for my career, that's really the direction I wanted to head in. And of course, as you know, Mick, it was a moment that opened up in front of us, both, where you could really be able to break through people that hadn't been able to break through before, like you and I. And we got in there and we were alternative voices. representing a young new generation. And you know, you and I were chalk and cheese, and you probably don't remember this, Mick, but we met at some media junket at Channel 4 when they launched Boom, be that and what it must have been about 1990 or something like that. And I remember you and I were in the same room. And I think we were sort of both being made sure, you know, our people were sort of, you know, making us look away from each other. And you know, there might have been a nodded, you know,
were they protecting you from Mick Scarlett?
do you know what though? I think that's one of the things that was weird about our era was like now, because we all communicate, we've all got the ability to talk to each other, that we kind of support each other. But back then, it was very much kind of this idea there can only be one. It was very much the Highlander school of living. So like the idea of being in the room with another disabled wheelchair using presenter, another one, I must kill him, he must kill him, let's fight. And I think that's why they kept us apart, because also I think we might have talked about our fee, because I know from like my being good friends with Julie Fernandez that as soon as you got to a point where you started talking about money, they were like, you know, they'd pay you peanuts, you know, and get amazingly talented monkeys. But then when you suddenly found out what everyone else was earning, you'd kind of go into the meetings and go, well, I want proper money. They'd suddenly go, well, yeah. Anyway, we're going to start a new talent search time. And then sort of people like Matt Fraser would suddenly pop up and it'd be like, oh, okay. But it's weird, isn't it? Why do you think the media doesn't celebrate the fact that there were so many disabled people in the media? I mean, before us, there was still sort of another generation of presenters. And then we came along. And then, you know, after us, there was like Matt and sort of Ash and loads of other people. You know, people think about Addy being one of the first, but Addy was like the fourth or fifth generation. Why don't they celebrate our contribution on the early footsteps of diversity?
It's infuriating, and I think partly actually Zec's probably just put his finger on it. It's because we're old, and television is not good at celebrating that, unless you've been consistently in the public eye in all that time. And you know, we're talking now 30 years ago, and you know there were a couple of people before us, not many though, Mick. I mean, I think you and I were really the sort of you know, and people like Mark Todd who were around at the same time as us. You know, we're really kind of the first generation, you know, to really break through. And not only that, I think because we were also able to transfer not only from, you know, programs that were at the time designed for people with special needs, which was the 80s terminology, but also we you know, were able to transfer that into a mainstream success and for a mainstream audience. And then go and talk to mainstream audiences in different programs. So, yeah, I think that was one of the reasons we perhaps confused people as well.
What was the highlight of your media career? Before we talk about what you've gone on to do, what was one of the? Because I know you've got lots of stories about talking to fantastic people that I'm well jealous of. Because my show was just me and a gang of kids, so I never got to meet anyone glamorous.
Well, the good thing was Boom was kind of based on a sort of Blue Peter model. So we had special guests, we had pop stars, and Tom Baker was involved. The Doctor Who was involved in our serial and in the first series. But I think probably the highlight had to be Basil Brush.
Boom!
I think it was actually one of the last of the original Basil Brush's television appearance, and this was the original Basil Brush, who was the really mangy one in the little tweed coat, and it looked like he could give you quite a nasty bite. You know,
the 100 had him, wouldn't they? Yeah.
not like the modern one. It's sort of fluffy and friendly, and you know, this one was really cutting, and you know, sort of said things that you really shouldn't say on children's television. And anyway, the guy that did it, a lovely guy called Ivan Owen, had to be in a box beside me, and so he was in a box, crouched down beneath me, and he put his hand up into Basil, and Basil would be talking to you, and every now and then the puppet sort of fell over slightly, like it was drunk or having a stroke. And it was just poor old Ivan. It was quite hard going for him, holding his hand up like this. And he had a monitor in the box where he would be watching what Basil and I was doing. So I was Mr. Andrew for that for Basil's last appearance, and that was great fun. I don't think it ever got better than that, Mick.
You'd rather Basil Brush than Emu, wouldn't you? I mean,
yes.
Oh, I did Emu. I had a brush with Emu as well.
See, this is it. See, we had the same slot, but you had the much more fun program. I mean, I had some great kids on my show, but they were kids.
But you had the more fun look, Mick.
But that was because you wanted to be in television. I fell into it by mistake. I wanted to be a pop star. I mean, if we talk about the media and how closed it is to disability, the music industry is just bizarre. You know, when I was doing it, people were going, "Oh, well, there's Ian Jury," and if you go now, well, there's the guy from the Mystery Jets and Ian Jury, and you're like, but Ian Jury has been dead for decades. You know, I mean, now you've got oh God, what's his name? I completely forgot. It doesn't matter. But do you know what I mean? It's like, so I thought I wanted to get into the music industry, and then I got spotted at a gig by a producer on a stag night, and basically he said, "Do you want to come and do a screen test?" So I went to ITV and did a screen test, and within a week was presenting a show. And I only said yes because I thought, well, Kylie Minogue's got a record deal, and everyone else, all the people that I thought of in television that got a record deal, I thought, well, I'll get a record deal. Didn't happen, but it meant I ended up being a TV presenter for about 3 decades, on and off, with the main being off at the moment. But anyway, now we've all got our nightmare stories of discrimination in the media. I want to know: are you able to tell me one of yours, Andrew?
Yeah, I you know, and I think there's some crossover with you here, mate, because I think probably one of the worst moments for me was after I'd done Boom, which ran for 2 years, was really successful on Channel 4. Just like your show, we were getting 2 or 3 million per week, and it was really successful, and it made its mark.
I have to point out, as many viewers as Don't Forget Your Toothbrush, presented by Jonathan Ross at the same time, and yet interestingly different career trajectories, which I've always put down to discrimination, but there we go.
Absolutely. Vic Ree's Big Night. We were getting better figures than he was then.
We didn't have a stick.
And I think after that, I was put up for various programs, and my career carried on in presenting for maybe about another decade before I went into production. But the real turning point, the point that I knew actually this has got a very limited shelf life, was when I was up for Blue Peter. And it was to replace John Leslie, who had just stepped down from Blue Peter, and I was put up for the audition for that. And and I think the audition kind of went all right. I had to play with a train set in the studio, and the feedback I got was, Andrew did very well, but they just don't feel that the Blue Peter audience is yet ready for a presenter in a wheelchair. And this was like 92, 93. And so that really kind of slammed down on me, because it just felt, oh, okay, I get it. It's not going to last very long. And I know, Mick, that subsequently they then approached you. And yeah, that was tough, because I think they just appointed Diane Louise Jordan, who was the first presenter of color on Blue Peter. Long overdue. But they kind of felt, I think, that was as far as they could go at that point, and that the kiddies would be too frightened or scared. And maybe they were right.
I mean, it's funny, because I did get offered Blue Peter, but I turned it down because I said I knew they always go after the Blue Peter presenters, and I was still doing music, and I was still doing like music fan stuff that you do in a band. And I was always like, are you sure I should be in kids TV? Because I don't think I should be, which is annoying, because very shortly after that, the Daily Mail ran a story about how I wasn't the right man to work in children's television because of my leather trousers. And so I ended up going into news. But yeah, no, it was weird, because I heard that a lot. Like I said, get Julie Fernandez to do it, and they wouldn't offer it to her because they wanted us to be able to climb up mountains, because they were going, oh, we want you to be like, thingy notes climbing up, and I was like, well, yeah, I can do that, but I'd rather not.
But also don't forget, I mean, even though I, as I said before we came on air, I don't remember these programs because I wasn't disabled back then, and like most people didn't have a disability, doesn't register. But the one thing I do remember is Blue Peter had a man on there, a disabled guy as a guest.
Joey.
Joey Deacon. And
Yep.
it became a term throughout the whole primary schools
Yep.
as you'd say to your mate, "You're all right,
Yes.
Joey."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even the Spastic Society that was presented on there or given a slot, the kids jumped on that and they changed their names. So maybe it's that fear of kids are just too bloody evil.
The stupid thing was, though, is that if they'd have got Andrew or myself or Julie at that point, we could hold our own. Do you know what I mean? The thing about the Joey Deacon story was it was kind of poor little Joey, look at him living his life. And it was really the kind of television that the BBC made when it made the program about Joey. It's kind of, that kind of thing. But very hello, and here's a young man, here's a man with spasticity, and and it was. Ugh. So anyway, yes,
it was very mediated, wasn't it, Mick? It was
very much about him and nothing to do with he hadn't been involved in anything to do with
absolutely.
it.
And so it was a mediated relationship, and that I think is what you and I changed.
Yes,
because up until then, I think disabled people were very much presented and sort of treated in cotton wool, whereas you and I were like, no, bollocks to that.
Yeah, we were. Very much so. Now, I'm going to ask one more media question, then we're going to get on to the meat of today. What do you think we can do, because I'm asking you this because I know how much you do about this, to make sure that young disabled talent coming into the media, coming into the arts, don't face the barriers that we did?
This is what's been driving nearly all of my work over the last couple of years, of actually coming to the point of recognizing what the barriers were, and realizing how difficult it was to keep going, maintaining a career, sustaining a career over 30 years. And Mick, I'm sure you can talk about that stop start all the initiatives that come and go around diversity and all the rest of it, which can be good, which can be bad, which can be really damaging as well. So ensuring that's spoken about, that's recognized, I think is really important, because once you get that stuff out there, of what those really challenging parts of your career were, then hopefully the next generation aren't going to face that. Now, of course, you can put in place all sorts of initiatives, all sorts of new ways of doing things as well, which is really important. But I think actually that shared experience, that inevitably that lived experience, of what the hurdles were, what the challenges were, how it nearly finishes you, is what's really important to share, because I think without that, there isn't that flavor that really makes non-disabled people wake up and think, oh God, we could get that sorted so easily.
I think it goes back to the first question about why they don't want to celebrate it, is because if they actually admitted that we've been around that long, then they'd have to admit that they haven't actually done as much as they like to make out they have done. Going, oh, look at the Paralympics 2012. And it's like, yeah, that's really good. Well done, bravo. And I think that you're right. I mean, I know it's what you do loads, and any disabled media and presenter types, as including artists that are building a career now, you owe Andrew so much, because he is beavering like the biggest beaver you've ever seen, away in the background getting stuff done. And
Mick, and what you do as well.
I mean, I just moan a lot. You actually do constructive stuff and get round the table. Right. We're going to move on because, of course, one, we've had a great chat, but poor old Zec's been left out. And, I also must remember that people are sending in their comments. Well done, viewers, because you can send in your comments. But we're going to talk now about the meat of today, which is about being disabled and getting old, and what it's like and what happens. We are all, of course, of a certain age. And so we're going to be talking about it from the experience of being in the process of getting older. I know we all are, but we're at that crabby bit. But if you're young, send in your questions. Say, what can you do? What your experience is. If you are like us and you're aging a bit, then send in your questions and your experiences and any tips that you've come up with to help with the aging process. And if you're older than us, tell us what we've got to look forward to.
Not possible.
Because we want to end on a high, obviously. Now, we've said this subject was going to be up because I have just been diagnosed with more rubbishy bum poo nastiness in my back. My spine is crumbling again. Hooray!
Was
And
that the
apparently
Latin term?
yes, it is. It's the medical term is poo bum nastiness. But it's and all the doctors are going, well, that's part of getting old. So I put it online, and Andrew said, "Oh, I know what that's like. I'm going through something similar." So I'm going to bring Zec in because I think that Zec should come in because Zec's a newbie in relation to joining the gang. We're both lifers, Andrew and me. But so, what's your experience, Zec, of aging and being disabled? Is it got easier? Has it got harder? Have you got used to it, or is it all falling to bits even more than usual?
Yeah, it's falling apart. I mean, I go back 15 years, and I was whizzing round on crutches up and down stairs. You know, I could clear a flight of stairs in one go. Like with my crutches, I was off. And, you know, then of course I knackered all my shoulders. And so it was like wheelchair or just lay on the floor. But yeah, nothing seemed to faze me when I was younger. I've had, I think it's about 14 knee surgeries. And I went into them laughing, joking there, but nothing bothered me. But as I said before, we had this rough patch, all of us, at like the end of last year. I think 3 or 4 months I had really bad health and I got scared for the first time. I felt mortal. You know, when you're younger, you're kind of like, that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I'm not going to say that hasn't got a lot to do with the way things are at the moment, and you don't feel like there's the support network with the medical profession there anymore because, you know, it's all so busy. But I think, yeah, just more scared than I ever was when I was younger, and bits falling apart. You know, my shoulders getting worse, my wrists and my hands, and and trying to get doctors to understand that, and that not just say, "Oh, it's just aging," and it's like, yeah, but I still need help.
Yeah, do you know what? It's funny, isn't it, Andrew? Because this is, I mean, as long-term wheelchair users, I don't know you, but no one ever told me that you've got to watch out for your shoulders when no one ever mentioned that when I was young and indestructible. Is it the same for you, Andrew? Are you kind of going through this stuff as well? You don't have to list all of your various physical failings.
Yeah, it's all going south, it's all falling apart. It's getting more challenging now. And you know, when Zec said that thing about getting scared, that resonates with me. And I think that's happened for the first time during the pandemic. And I think there's that sense of the NHS not quite being that catch, or that there to catch us when we fall over, that safety net that it was, obviously because of all the pressures it's under with COVID and COVID itself. And I've been thinking, well, I've had 50 decent years, and keeping the medics at bay, doing exactly pretty much as I please, and it's inevitable that my disability will catch up with me eventually. But at the same time, there's loads of stuff that I'm going through now with my back, with my spine, very much similar to you, Mik, with a crumbling lower spine, and really recognizing changes that I'm now going through, and I feel that I've aged in a very short time frame, rather than perhaps over a longer period where I see my friends, who don't have long-term disabilities.
Do you know what, I think it's funny because I mean I was a bit strange because what's happened to me now has happened to me twice before. This crumbling spine thing, it's to do with the cancer I had as a baby, and the treatment left me with a spine that wasn't super powered, shall we say. It's a bit more Swiss cheesy than you'd want. And I'm always shocked at the fact that doctors don't kind of measure you by your own standards. So like they kind of go, well, what's your normal? Like they go, well, are you normal? And you go, yeah. And they don't go by your normal. They're measuring you by. So when you say, oh, I'm feeling everything's working normally, I've got a letter from the doctors that are looking into my back, and it goes, oh, well, he claims that his bladder and bowel are working normally. And it's like, well, I didn't say they work normally. I just said they work normally for me.
For you, yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And it's like, so I've not lost anything. I'm not saying it works perfectly. I don't know, because without being funny, I've never worked normally. So the idea, and it's this thing, what do you think they get wrong when they're talking about disability and aging?
I think one of the biggest problems is not having doctors who are really able to see you holistically. And I think seeing the whole picture, because everything in the medical profession is so specialized. So you've got the people that are specialist in wee, people that are specialist in poo, all the rest of it.
That is their medical terminology as well. I'm a poo specialist.
But we don't have the people that can say, oh, I see. Okay, so if something's happening there with the wee, what impact is that then having on, So I think that's one of the problems. And in a sense, that's partly the role of the GP. But given actually what happens to us as disabled individuals tends to be so specialist, it's farmed out to others. I think that's one of the big trickiest thing for me in navigating this, in so much as I've got to sort of get a medical degree myself to decode the terms and to start understanding what it is they're saying about me. I think going back to that question, that point you made, Mick, about well, actually, are they asking the right questions? It's also, you've got to be really careful that you are asking the right questions of them to get the answers that you need. I just realized I had an appointment with a spinal specialist a couple of months ago, and I came away from it none the wiser, realizing that actually the problem was I didn't ask the right questions.
But don't you think that, I mean, it should really be that, you shouldn't have to be a medical student. I mean, I'm lucky at college. I studied the same course as a trainee nurse because I wanted to be a medical social worker. So kind of I've got enough human biology knowledge to be able to hold my own. I also have a collection of actual medical textbooks on all of the things I might ever have, so I can read them. I once had a gastroenterologist refuse to treat me because I kept up with her when she was talking Latin. And she once rang me and spoke only in Latin. And I was Googling away furiously, talking back to her to find out. And in the end, she went, I can't deal with him. He's far too difficult. So she never wrote this pleasant 56-year-old man, which of course is doctor speak for they don't challenge us, you do much. I've just seen that someone on it, David, was talking about getting pressure sores. And that's something else that I had probably about the same age, David, to be honest, and never had one before, suddenly had one, and found that the doctors just didn't know what they were doing, and nurses came and packed it, which then meant it got infected. And it was like, and in the end, I had to go and have what's called a debridement, which basically was having your ass cut off. And basically, but I mean, that's all fine now, but I have to watch out for it. Because if I sit for too long, especially on something hard like a pub bench, then I have to come home and not sit up for 2 days to let it heal. And it's like, these are things that we should be told.
Yeah.
Which we
I've never been told about that. I was never told about pressure sores.
Like, because you get out of your chair, don't you, sometimes, and you sit somewhere. And I mean, basically, I was actually filming for a pilot for a TV show down by the Docklands. And I went to the loo and thought, my bum feels wet. And I thought, oh, maybe I've wet myself. No. What actually happened was my bum had exploded.
Happened to me twice, Mick. And in the early 90s, actually. And I'm lucky, touch wood. It's never affected me since. They scared me witless. I on my first TV program, I had one when I was working at the BBC for that monarchy film. And I'd be, whilst making that film in 1986, I'd be in and out of, because there used to be a surgery at Television Centre. There was a nurse's area, and I was getting them to do this really specialist packing of a really nasty wound, and it was terrifying. I ended up getting infected, and it became really unpleasant. And it happened. It happened because I was getting myself up and down stairs.
Yes.
Bouncing on my backside up and up.
Do you know what? This is something I think that people don't appreciate, going back to the media stuff, is how much we had to put ourselves, how much a lot of our injuries now are to do with the stuff we did to get work in that era. For me, it was gigs, crawling up and down stairs, crawling on stage. But I remember doing a film of The Tempest for the BBC that was so bad that Alan Yentop burnt it in the car park. And one of the scenes I did was jumping down the flight of stairs to confront Prospero. I was Caliban, of course, and modern day version. all in leather. It was great. And so I had to keep crawling up and down these stairs because I jumped down them about 50 times. And at the end, I was like, look, I really can't do this anymore because I think I'm going to need to go to hospital. But we did that all the while. I mean, what do you wish? I mean, it's kind of tricky for Zec because you're younger. When you were first diagnosed, what do you wish you'd been told to watch out for? Because I think this is something, because we've been lifers, so we were told we'd be lucky if we'd still be here at this age. So, but for a newbie that joined not that long
the problem
ago,
with mine is it was gradual. So I didn't have like a big traumatic event that was then picked up. It started off with tearing out cartilage in my knees and them going, we're going to go in and fix it. And they kept wanting to go in and fix, and I let them keep going. And it just, they knackered my knees. But I was never warned about crutches. They just go, there's a pair of NHS crutches.
Yeah.
And I carried on for years, bouncing round and round until, you know, I've damaged, as I say, like wrists, hands, elbows, and shoulders. So, you know, unless you do, you know, a spinal cord injury, cancer, MS, any of the big things that are really covered and got massive support, you don't. Well, you know,
do you know what? Like, do you know what? I love this. This is the thing, I think, where we all get mistaken. I think this is also one of the arguments about the invisible and visible impairment debate, right? No one gets any support, right?
But do you know what I mean? You get more. There's people there for it. When you gradual knee,
right? You can't really see because of the light, but my hands are covered in scars from when I had a spinal cord injury, and they said, well, we'll get you walking again, put me in calipers, stood me up, put me on crutches, and I walked and walked away. And one day, okay, it was the entire length of the King's Road. I won't deny, bit stupid, but it's a long road. But it was shopping. I had to go shopping. And my hands split, and there was blood running down my crutches. And it was like, I mean, that was one of the incidents that led to me saying, right, I'm just going to go in a wheelchair, sod that. You know, but people don't get advice. The number of people that have spinal cord injuries that get pressure sores, you know, like, I mean, like Andrew said, you know, there he was, a young guy, got a pressure sore, wasn't given the advice, don't try crawling up and downstairs.
No. It was only another wheelchair user that actually said to me,
that's the truth.
It, you're hurting yourself, borrow my spare chair. It's not as bad as you think. You think it's this big disaster thing and the end of your life and, oh my God, I'm all disabled. You will do yourself a favour. And without him, I'd be worse off.
I think that's the key. I think that's the truth, isn't it, Andrew? It's the fact
I think, you know,
we don't get told it. We tell each other it, and we just have more ability to talk to each other now than we ever did.
And I was in the same boat as you, Mick, because I was chucked out of a hot air balloon that crashed on boom. I did.
If you see that online, it's great.
You know, we had to be these poster boys for being able to do anything. Disabled, there's no barriers, there's no limits.
We would do anything. Stop us.
And so we were the poster boys.
The only disability in life is a bad attitude.
And we had to throw ourselves at these things. And it probably damaged us. If you know, looking back, would I say no to it now? Probably not. Because it was a good laugh, a good story. It's still on YouTube, you know.
I'm looking that up.
But I think one thing I can say to David that I think, I mean, certainly made a big difference to me in terms of pressure sores, because I had to in the early 90s, exactly the same thing with Mick. I had to have nasty operations to get them sorted out. And ever since, I've used a Roho cushion, and ever since I've not had another one. And also I've not been throwing myself up and down stairs in the way that I used to. So I think a sort of combination of finding the right cushion.
I've just been pressure mapped. I've just had the pressure mapping done.
Exactly, something like that. You know, if you get the right cushion together with, you know, managing your activity in an appropriate fashion, not always difficult, not always easy, possibly a bit boring sometimes, but ultimately, as you get older, something you really need to do.
I mean, poor old, you know, you're talking about Addy earlier. Addy's actually now recovering from surgery on his rotator cuff. Because you think of the things that Addy's done, you know, pushing. He's known for it. And I think he would take anything they threw at him because of his dog-headed nature and sort of like getting on. But, you know.
See, it's funny, right? Because this is something that we are doing, isn't it, Andrew, in the back room, is saying to the people that make the stuff like that Addy makes, you shouldn't be expecting people to climb up mountains. Like I've seen. Did you see the clip of him, the outtake from Addy in Africa, where he's on a mountaintop and he's going, "Here I am, blah blah blah," and there's like a view of a savannah before him, and then he trips. His wheelchair hits a rock, and he shoots out and he rolls, and the camera runs to find him, and he's about that far from the edge, and he's just gone ah, and he's laughing, and it's all and I'm like, that's what's wrong with the media. That's what's wrong with society. We keep expecting disabled people to really damage themselves to be like us, like everyone else. And the answer is that we should be making a society that's accessible so that you don't have to knacker your shoulders. You don't have to get pressure sores. You don't have to have your spine collapse or whatever it is because you're just trying to live a life like everybody else. I think that's the big thing that we're all trying to go for. And that's why inclusive design is so important.
You know, that's what we were selling in the late 80s and the early 90s. That, you know, that lifestyle that you can do anything. But it's you know, I think there's a really important point here. I mean, I often watch the Paralympians, seeing the way that they throw themselves around, and you know, not even Paralympians, people doing wheelchair basketball and stuff like that. You know, that can get really nasty. And I have it in my head when I say, "Oh, don't do that." You know,
yes, no, I do too.
You know, you're going to give yourself trouble in the future. And I think there is there's a slight macho culture around disability as well.
And the superhumans.
And I think, you know, I think it often comes around with acquired disability as well.
Yes, I do. Yeah, I agree. I mean, I know, Zec, you said this, didn't you? When you started, it kind of affected your masculinity. I know. I'm weird because I went from being disabled but walky, runny, skippy, limpy guy at school to paralysis and wheelchair at 15. I dallied with the macho trying to be, and some people still say I'm a bit macho, but I actually then luckily discovered neuromantics and sort of, you know, you can be a bit girly and and that was my savior. But I presented at the wheelchair rugby, and I met a lot of the wheelchair rugby guys, and that is a really macho environment. They are. And also it's not only men, it's a mixed team, but it's a very macho environment. They push themselves till they break. I remember one of the French team had something to do with meningitis, and they'd lost his arms and legs, but he had got gaffer tape on all of his stumps, and he was basically pushing his chair with his stumps, and then he'd fly out because they fly out, and as soon as he fell on the floor, he'd stop breathing. So then someone would rush on and pump his chest. Someone else would put his chair up, and then they'd go, 1, 2, 3, allez hop, and he'd go, and then go playing again. And I'd be like, I don't care what anyone says. No gold medal is worth dying on a sports field for. And I think that is one of the things about getting old that I think happens to some, not all, but I think we, Andrew and myself, have definitely reached the age where we're thinking, I want to live to be very old, so I'm going to look after myself. Now, one of the bits about getting old, I think we don't talk about much, is mental health. But yet all of us have said that we got scared. And it is funny that I think it's something that we're all facing, is that fear of death. Are you also experiencing the thing where lots of your other disabled friends are dying a lot at the minute? Because it's really happening to me. In the last 5 years, so many of my friends have died that I feel really mortal, because it's like, and everyone's just going, oh, well, that's what happens when you get old and if you're disabled. And it's like, really? To bring you all down, of course, the cheerful chat is there. Any more depressing subjects?
I mean, yeah, several disabled colleagues and friends have been lost over the last couple of years. I think more specifically through the pandemic, or as a consequence of the pandemic. And I think, you know, that point that I mentioned earlier about that feeling that support mechanism of the NHS isn't quite as elastic as perhaps it used to be for when we really need it, or even, you know, if something goes wrong that you don't want to go there because of the threat of COVID. You know, that's a real difference to the way we need to think about ourselves and our physical health, and inevitably that affects mental health as well. But yeah, over the last 2 years, very that's been a really big thing for me.
Yeah, agree.
It's because something I do know, because I've got a friend that studied the psychology of spinal cord injury, and now he's done a doctorate in it. And he was saying one of the things that he found most shocking was that all of the books that talk about anyone with a spinal cord injury, whether it be through birth like yourself or injury like me, the life expectancy is kind of, well, if they last 40 years, you know, that's unlikely. And yet we are people who are entering way beyond that. And I think, is there an element that this is one of the problems is that up until our generation,
You're pioneering
people
this as
didn't
well,
really get this far. So is that kind of another reason why doctors don't know what they're talking about, because they've got no one to refer to?
I think that's absolutely a factor. I think there's too few of us that have got to this age, because, you know, Mick, you've often talked that you were told or your parents were told as a child that you know, it's going to be a couple of years. Don't get too excited, you know, about any longevity. And so I think we've, you know, we come from that generation when actually the NHS was really brutal. And I think that that issue of aging just hasn't been out there because so few of us have really done that. Now, of course, you know, there have been older disabled people before, and people, of course, that survived the war, who got injured and all the rest of it. And we saw that huge improvement actually in access and conditions as a consequence of that. And we benefited from it in our youth, Mick. And I think, you know, the lady who's just written from Canada, has said that, you know, there's a aging population there and more people experiencing disability. As a consequence of the pandemic with long COVID, we're also going to see more and more, you know, specialism around disability, more experience of disability. But what we need to go with that is specialism of managing it within health settings and the NHS. Because, you know, I remember when I was a disability champion for arts and culture, advising the government. You know, I was saying the one place you really need to have one of these figures is the NHS, because it's the NHS that sometimes really doesn't understand or manage the nuance of managing people's differences and disabilities. And I think we need more experts in this area, because at the moment it's just so not joined up.
No.
Who is the oldest disabled person we know? And I'm not on about disability through age, but I mean, do you know anyone who has been a lifetime wheelchair user and is?
Yes, there's Phil Friend, I know, who's a bit older than me. Do you know what? That's
founder of Grey Eye.
Nabil?
Nabil, yeah.
Yeah, Nabil's, I mean, Nabil, I can't remember where Nabil lives now, because he dropped off the planet.
Must be in the 60s.
Yeah, but exactly. So the people I know are about sort of 5-10 years older than me. I don't know many lifers who are in their 70s and 80s, and I think you're right, Andrew. I think we'll probably be the first generation. We might be bags of poo by that time. We'll be here. We'll just been rebuilt so many times that we'll almost not resemble a human. We'll be more like a Dalek, like one of the kind of the little creatures that live inside.
The Futurama headed
which has always been my ambition, to have a robot body. Now we're nearly up to time, right? So I'm gonna say, what do you do now to look after yourself, and what tips can you give to our wonderful viewers, whether they be older like us or younger, to look after themselves, so we can sign off on a high and hopefully allow our viewers to go away and not spend the rest of the evening crying into their beer?
I think what, you know, absolutely, you know, adapt your behavior and to your age and your lifestyle. And you know, I think, you know, there's no way I would have survived this long if I'd carried on leading the kind of risky lifestyle I did in the 90s and early 2000s of, you know, hauling myself up and down steps. You know, without any question, that's had an impact on my physical health, and will continue to have in the future. But I think also, you know, really push your healthcare providers, push your doctors and your specialists to really get the answers that you need from them, and to get the advice that you need, because it's also we all know sometimes that's really not easy if we're not asking the right questions, if they're not asking the right questions. You know, really ensuring that you know, we've got those communication channels with the people who've got expertise, because that's really important. If you don't have a good communication with those guys, then you're going to have problems.
Yeah.
Zec, what are your tips?
I'm going to be completely useless. I don't have any. I just lay there awake at night going, I'm going to die. Honestly, I've been really useless lately. I wish I had some.
I don't know, though, because you were saying before we went live, you were saying that actually you feel a bit better, and part of it is that you feel a bit more positive. I mean, is that one of the things that we need to? I know no one on this show would ever say that positive thinking will make you healthy. That would never be something we would say.
No.
But is there something about seeing the good side of it? Maybe, or shall I just?
Yeah, I mean, I've been lucky. As I said, that real rough health patch. Bloods have come back. There's something going on with the liver, even though I don't drink, but obviously take a lot of medication. But I've suddenly now having really what I call good health. Others may not call good health, but health that's enabled me to get out to shul yesterday and out for a push along the seafront. But yeah, I mean, it all improves, doesn't it? Mental health and physical health does go hand in hand to a degree.
Yeah. And I'd also just say, your Bill in the chat has mentioned Lady Masham. Lady Masham's in her 90s, and she experienced a fall from a horse. I think in the 1950s. She competed in the Paralympics in the 1960s. Incredible character, and there's an inspiration for her. She's still going in her 90s.
Yeah. Yes. Thanks, Mark, for saying that. Don't listen to 3-year-old. Thank you very much, mate. I'll tell you what, right? I'm going to quickly give you mine, and then we'll go and let you get on with your aging process. One, I agree with what's the? I agree with, and then more. I agree with Andrew about this idea of going into medical situations and being kind of quite proactive. But one, I think I avoided doctors for years because I didn't want them touching me and getting near me. You will get to a point when you do have to. So then when you go in with confidence, and also make sure they understand when you say something's wrong, you don't mean something's wrong and I'm disabled. You mean something's wrong for you. I'm a big believer now. It's taught me this recent period that normal for Norfolk is something we've got to remember. Is it normal for you? Not is it normal for some biped who can run around and play football and they've never been disabled in their life? Never, I broke my leg once. No. Is your body functioning the way it used to do? And if not, make sure you explain that. This isn't new. This is new to me. This is wrong. I don't feel like this is right. Because if I'd have done that 3 or 4 years ago, I wouldn't be where I am now. 2, and I'm going to say something, and you may all hate me for it. Yoga. Oh. I took up yoga. My arms were knackered. I was about to have surgery on both of them, right? I took up yoga 3 years ago. I can now move my arms completely freely. I don't do proper yoga. I do a type of yoga there's even a video on my YouTube page.
And can I say, I've really started your yoga 10 times.
I never did any of them, right? But it's basically a case of moving yourself. Keep yourself moving. Don't be ashamed that you can't do what you did when you were 20. Of course not. And when you're 20, do your stuff, have fun, but always remember you will pay for this. So is it worth it? Is there a way of doing it where you don't need to crawl upstairs, where you don't need to be carried, where you don't need to put yourself in danger? And remember that now, of course, it's illegal to expect that of you, especially at work. And then lastly, seize the day. Because both Andrew and me, we might be going, oh, well, we're getting a bit old and things are a bit cruddy and we might need more surgery and things are a bit falling apart. But we've had a fantastic life, right? So go out and do it, because I always think it's better to go out and do it and come back and lay on the sofa for 3 days and not feel up to it than to not do it, because you're still going to get old. It's still all going to fall to bits, right? And that goes for even when you're old. I haven't done anything all Christmas. I've just laid on the sofa waiting because the doctor rang me 2 days after Christmas to go, oh my God, you're falling to pieces. And it was the worst New Year ever, because it was like, but then I realized they always do that with us, don't they, folks? Whenever they see our scans, they go,
they panic.
What on earth is this? Yeah. So don't worry about it. Go out and have fun. And with that positive message of confidence, yoga, and fun, God, I'm sounding like some new age hippie. What am I going to do?
We will post a link to Mik's yoga. It is
Yes,
good.
we will post a link to Mix Yoga, and then there's even one of me in a lovely leotard. I did 3 of those, and I had to not put 2 of them up because the angle kind of focuses on the groin area, and it was a little bit
He's
homoerotic.
bragging again.
Yes, it was a bit. I put a banana down there, obviously, and a shuttlecock, like Wham used to. And with that, and much waffle, and we've run over by 5 minutes, I want to say thank you so much to the wonderful Andrew Miller. Thank you so much for Zec the Tech for making the magic happen. Thank you, dear listeners and viewers and stuff, for coming on board with another DHTV. Don't forget, we're looking for presenters. So if you fancy it, contact us. And with that, I'm going to say, see you later, folks. And bye from all 3 of us. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.